Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Hi, I'm Shiv Agarwal, founder and CEO of Earth ID, a decentralized identity management platform. I'm also leading GBA in Europe. I welcome you all to the third event in our series on decentralized identity, where we bring industry thought leaders to discuss the impact on different industries. Today, we will be focusing on telecom sector. Most of us would agree that mobile technology has one of the biggest impacts on human lives, connecting billions of users across the world and providing access to global services to the common man. However, with every good, there comes some evil, in this case, privacy, or rather the lack of it. We are now used to conduct our lives with our smartphones, and everything that we do or we have is accessible. So the biggest question we should try to address today is how do we ensure privacy while continue to reap the benefits of this transformative technology? A decentralized identity empowers users with data ownership, privacy, and consent, and blockchain technology plays a very crucial role in its design. Talking about blockchain, most of us believe that Bitcoin was the inception of blockchain technology, or maybe some of us, including me. However, we have someone with us today who knew about blockchain long before Bitcoin. Actually, he is one of the founding fathers of blockchain technology, and his work is referred in the Bitcoin paper as well. I'm so excited and honored to have Dr. Scott Stoneta today with us. With a lot of humility and a bit of coaxing, he agreed to share his insights and thought leadership with us. Hi, Scott. Thank you for joining us today. The stage is yours.
Okay, well, thanks very much. Again, if everyone could just, after listening to that intro, if you would all just lower your expectations a little bit, then I think we'll all get along better. But I do very much appreciate the opportunity to speak on this topic. It is obviously something very near and dear to me. And I come at it from two perspectives, okay? I come at it from a conceptual and theoretical perspective because of my background, having done some of the early work that at least laid the foundation for blockchain, along with my collaborator, Stuart Haber, work that we did at Bell Communications Research, part of the old Bell Labs system. But I also come at it from a very practical, business-oriented perspective. And the reason I say that is because I currently am a partner at a venture capital firm, Yugen Partners, where we're focused exclusively on the blockchain and adjacent spaces. And so it's fun to wax poetic about conceptually what is possible here, but I'm also required to generate a return on money that our investors give to us. And so we have to make a lot of practical, hard-headed decisions about what companies are investable and what ideas have the possibility of actually being successful. And so I come at it from both of those perspectives today. And I just want you to understand that as background. My message, just to keep it clean, is really in three parts, okay? First is what a great idea digital identity and self-sovereign identity and decentralized ownership of one's identity, what a great idea it is. Second, why it is so hard to get this to function as a viable business model. And third, what it is that you can do about that. So if you'll allow me a little bit of indulgence, I want to talk first about why it's such a great idea, okay? Then we'll get to the more practical side. Then we'll get to the discouraging part, and then we'll get to the practical path forward, okay? So I'm a bit of an obsessive compulsive person. And so I have this never-ending anxiety about rental car companies. Now, for those of you that don't know, rental car companies are what we had before there was Uber. You would travel to a faraway city, and you needed a car, and so you made a reservation ahead of time, and then you showed up at the counter and you worked out the transaction and you drove around in a car. And anyway, as an obsessive compulsive person, I've always had this anxiety that I make the reservation a couple of weeks in advance, and they say, okay, thank you, Mr. Stornetta. Your confirmation number is ABC 378. Okay. And my anxiety is that I will show up at the counter and I will say, so I've got this reservation ABC 378, and the person attending to me will type it in, and then there'll be this long pause, and they start to look uncomfortable, and they say, I'm sorry, Mr. Stornetta, we don't have any record of that reservation number. And what's the basic problem here? The basic problem here is that there is a data asymmetry problem. I've got this little confirmation number. They've got this huge database of all their records. And if it comes down to a disagreement, they win. Okay. Now, wouldn't it be nice to live in a world where the record that I bring is just as valid as any records that they have? Okay. That would be a world of information symmetry where the customer, the individual customer, has just as much power when it comes to information as the large corporation. Now, again, this doesn't directly tie to digital identity, but I was trained as a theoretical physicist, so just let me lay the groundwork and then I'll get to my point. So now let me tell you another story. This is one that you're all familiar with. It involves the interaction we have with companies like Google or Facebook, or let's just use Google as our example for today. And you go to Google, you type in a search that you're looking for. And in addition to what you're looking for, there's also displayed a set of ads that seem relevant to your search. And maybe you glance at the ads and you click on one. And it's obviously of benefit to the advertiser for you to click. And you would argue that therefore there ought to be a small transfer of money. Okay. And the problem, of course, is that there is a small transfer of money, but it doesn't go to you. It goes to the intermediary. It goes to Google, who runs AdSense or AdWords. And you ask yourself, gee, I'm the one that is creating the value here. Why am I not getting compensated for it? And again, this goes to it's a more complex situation here than the rental car, but it fundamentally goes to the fact that you are not able to be in control of your interest and information. Okay. And so let me say a third quick story, and then I'll come to my point number one. Okay. And that has to do with privacy and the sense that you sometimes wish that people could not get access to information about you. You'd at the very minimum like selective control over that information. And so this really does get to the basic idea: who controls information about me? And how can I put myself more in a position of control? I don't want to say complete ownership, because so much of the information about me is information that involves my interaction with another party. And so you'd have to agree that in the same sense that I have a right to that information, that the other party, between the two of us, the information was created. And so they also have a right to that information. And so obviously it's a little more complicated than if it's, some physical object that either you hold or somebody else holds. It's not quite that simple. But what a wonderful world it would be if there were no information asymmetry and we as individual consumers or citizens had as much information power as large centralized organizations. And of course, that's really the promise of this grand idea. So now let me turn to point number 2. Why is it that, since it seems like such a great idea, that it's been talked about for so long and it's such a struggle to see it effectively implemented? Well, I suppose part of what you could say is, well, it's because it takes time to establish infrastructures and standards and things that all parties agree to. And all of that is true. There's a need for technology that can support it. And you know, I think we're all aware that blockchain can be a meaningful part of that. Obviously spearheaded by Earth ID. I'm sorry, I just had to get in a plug for our sponsor. But I don't really think that is the fundamental limiting factor. And I think the fundamental limiting factor is not in the realm of technology, but rather in the realm of social dynamics, or even more bluntly, economic dynamics. It basically goes to this. While it would be a great idea for the consumer, and potentially in the long run, a great idea for everybody, the people that have the power now are unlikely to simply cede it because they say, oh, you know, this is a great idea. It goes against my economic interests, but it's such a great idea, let's just do it. Okay? Said nobody ever. Okay? The world just does not work that way. And it reminds me, back when I was a researcher at Bell Communications Research, we worked on certain social dynamic issues. And one of the most celebrated papers in the space was a paper called "Who Does the Work? Who Gets the Benefit?" And the idea was, they reviewed a whole series of proposed situations that could be greatly improved for all parties if the world were restructured in a certain different way, if people interacted in a different way. And the problem with so many of the ideas was that the person that was being asked to do all the work to change the situation was not the same as the person that actually got the benefit of the situation. And when who does the work and who gets the benefit is separated, you've got a kind of stalemate. Everyone can agree in principle that this ideal world that we're, you know, trying to get to would eventually benefit everybody. But there's a kind of Nash equilibrium, a game theoretic constraint here, which is everybody has to be moved incrementally from their existing position, including those that are in positions of control and power, voluntarily over to this new world. And so creating the incentive systems that will actually bring this whole change about is not nearly as easy as it sounds. Okay. And again, I stress, as much as I love technology and, you know, have the foundation for my career in coming up with innovative technologies, the technology issues, while important, are not the hardest nut to crack. It's getting the incentive structure right. Okay. So what do we see and what do we find ourselves willing to invest in are companies that are figuring out how to get the incentive structure right. And there as well, I'd like to give a little bit of advice just based on the companies that we look at and the fact that the large majority of companies, as with any venture capital investor that we talk to, we end up saying, no, we're not going to invest. You know, it's kind of a sad position to be in, to always feel like the bad guy. But I think you're all aware that, you know, for every, let's say, 10 pitches that a venture capital firm hears, maybe 1 or 2 get invested. And so we spend a lot of time saying no. And so I reflect on why we're saying no. And here's the advice I would give to those that want to be in the 1 or 2. One is that you have to focus on having a value proposition that works even when your customer is one of the first to adapt and adopt the new technology. It's easy to sell how once everyone gets there and we get to critical mass, then everyone will want in on this, okay? Yeah, that and $5, at least in the United States, will buy you a cup of coffee at Starbucks, okay? That alone is not worth very much, okay? It's coming up with a mechanism that even the very early customers benefit, and benefit in a pretty major way, in order to persuade them to be early adopters and to make that incremental move. And so my advice there more generally is to focus in on that customer and really understand their circumstances and how to create a small scale viable value proposition. Yes, you wouldn't be entrepreneurs. You wouldn't be trying to make this play, whether you're from an established company or a new company, if you didn't have big ambitions about how big this could be, okay? How revolutionary this transformation could be. And you want to cash in on that. I get that, and that's great. And eventually you will. But the key to getting into that, desired end game is to think small while hiding your larger ambitions, okay? And focus in on making it a win for those very first few customers. Again, this is a space that I've thought about in depth and could give much more specific thoughts and share ideas with people, but I was just asked to do a 20-minute overview. As a kind of consolation prize, if people have more specific questions, I've encouraged them to somehow route them to Shiv, and I will be happy to try to respond to them after the fact. But other than that, I'm grateful to be part of this adventure, and I'm really pulling for your individual success. Thanks very much.
I just want to applaud. I'm going to applaud. I know everybody else is on mute. Scott, I just love hearing you. Every time you speak, I'm just inspired.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I love the reality check that is brought to the table in every conversation. But I do agree that I think there has to be a balance between the ambition and the practicality. But as we all agree, I think kind of agree that there's a huge potential. The question is, what is that roadmap? What are those use cases that we can pursue now, and then to basically by looking at that North Star, right? And the purpose of these sessions that we are doing on a monthly basis is basically to look at what are those use cases across different industries which we can pursue now, and then what is that small, even minute value that we can deliver to the customers in those specific sectors, right? And I think this is the power of discussion, and I think this is what we are here to do. And then on that note, I would like to introduce Gerard Dash. I think most of us know him. He's basically the thought leader behind GBA, which is a Government Blockchain Association, a global non-profit organization which is helping governments and public sector organizations across the world to understand and adopt this innovative technology, and then basically come up with a lot of use cases to basically to help the lives of the citizens and public in general. Gerard, over to you. You have the floor now, and I think we have all the panelists with us.
Yeah, and I think I'm sharing my video and you can hear me. So I do want to say one thing. Scott is going to be one of the speakers at GBA's big event that we're doing hopefully in May. We'll keep our fingers crossed. I just put the link in the chat, so by all means, please take a look at that. You don't have to look at my pretty face. You can look at that and see Scott, and Don Tapscott, and just all the other incredible folks will be with. Shiv will be there. It'll be great. Okay, so let's talk about telecom. We have an incredible panel today. I'm going to let the panel introduce themselves, but before we start, I just want to share a little bit about why we're talking about this. So why digital identity and telecom? So what we see right now when we do a survey of how blockchain is being used in the telecom space, we're seeing it be used for things like roaming management, reconciliation, all kinds of settlement platforms. Some telecom companies are implementing projects to use blockchain to manage international call traffic. And then some are going back to the incentive Scott was talking about, some are using it to figure out how to take mobile data and turn that into tradable digital assets. So with all of this, billions of dollars of value and assets and all of the kinds of things that telecom companies have to talk about, we want to talk today about why digital identity is important for those use cases in those areas. So let's do this. I'm going to ask the panelists each to take just maybe about 2 minutes or so to introduce themselves briefly. So let's start with Rajesh, and then Shiv. Did you introduce yourself at the very beginning? I don't know if you...
I'll speak in the last.
Right. So let's do Rajev, and then Satai. I hope I say your name right.
Satya.
Yes, exactly.
Satya is easy.
Perfectly. Followed by Piyush. So go ahead and introduce yourselves.
Do we have Rajesh? Priya, do we have Rajesh on the call? If not, I think maybe Satya, you can start, I think, and then we can see where Rajesh is stuck.
Yes, please. Satya, please go ahead. I'm checking with Rajesh.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon or good evening, depending upon where you are from. This is Satya or Satyavati Devadari. I am the Chief Cybersecurity Architect in Micro Focus. I lead the cross-functional product solutions for cyber res or cyber resiliency, which is actually the cybersecurity all around. And I had more than 22 plus years of experience, out of which majority of the time I spent in cybersecurity transformational projects. And very happy to be here and share my thoughts around the decentralized identity. Thank you, Shiv.
Thank you, Satya.
And
I think we have Rajesh now. I think Rajesh, are you unmuted? Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, that's right. I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes, please.
we can hear you, and we can see you in front of the Golden Gate Bridge.
Yeah, yeah. That gives you that's the virtual backdrop that you can keep and hide all your mess, right? Hello, everyone. My name is Rajesh Dudu. I lead the cybersecurity practice as well as the blockchain practice at Tech Mahindra. Tech Mahindra is fifth largest IT giant from India. We are about $5.2 billion in revenues. We have presence in about 90 countries. And I lead the cybersecurity and the blockchain practice.
Excellent. And let's see, who are we missing?
Piyush and David.
Oh. Do one of you guys?
Yeah, I can go next. So I'm David Palmer. I'm the blockchain lead for Vodafone Business IoT. Pleased to get a late call up from Shiv to join the panel today. I've been looking at blockchain for the last 6 years in a corporate environment over the last 4 years. So I've been instrumental in exploring the technology for use. Yeah, digital identity is obviously one of the key components. So happy to have a discussion on that today. So pleased to be on the panel.
Perfect. Is that everybody, or I think we're good?
I think Piyush, can you please go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure, Shiv. Thank you, Gerard. My name is Piyush Sharma from India. In my primary career, I have been a global technology, digital, and entrepreneurial leader. I would say God was kind, and I was fortunate to mark out a life of success as a CEO of a few multi-billion-dollar organizations in about 25 plus years of my corporate life. For the last few years, I have now been operating at the intersection of digital technology, startup ecosystem, academia, and the government. And I am excited to be a part of the global blockchain conclave focused on decentralized identity for telecom sector.
Excellent. Excellent. So I want to start with David, and then I want to open this question up. Well, then let me start with David. David, you said you've been you're in the telecom space, and you've been looking at blockchain. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the areas that you've been looking into and the intersection between telecom and blockchain? David, if you're on mute, we can't hear you.
Yeah, so sorry, I think the line cut out. So some of the areas, again, blockchain is something that is being explored. It's not really in production in a big way in the telecom sector at the moment, but I think the potential is now beginning to flag. So I mean, some of them, I think you named them, Gerard. So roaming is one of them. Contract management is another one of them. Digital identity is another one of them. So those are the sort of main ones. I mean, you really start to look for blockchain where you want to automate the external automation boundary. So it's focused on where you have a process where that interfaces with external parties, so customers or other organizations, and you want to automate that process. And to do that, you need trust, and blockchain brings automated trust. So roaming is a prime example of that. Contracts is a prime example of that. And obviously, digital identity is an interface to join people, business, and things in an automated way and manage the data and consent between them. So, yeah, those are the key use cases.
See, if you read any of Scott's work or any of the earlier work from David Sham, they talk about blockchain really as a mechanism for untrusted parties to interact with each other, right? Which was the premise of what the Satoshi white paper then built off of. In the area of telecom, and I'm going to open this up to the panel and let anybody who wants to address it. Why is identity so important to telecom and some of these use cases that we've talked about, right? Roaming, reconciliation, settlement platforms, international call traffic, turning mobile data into tradable digital assets. And anyone on the panel that'd like to
yeah, let me jump on that one. So I think Gerard, my understanding is that when we look at telecom sector, I think this is one of the sectors, or mobile technology as an innovation that has impacted the most number of human lives, right? So we have this technology has the deepest penetration. I think more than 5 billion people around the world have access to mobile technology in one way or form, and it has provided access to a lot of services in terms of voice calls, in terms of access to internet, and a lot of innovations around the world is now on our phone, right? So it has also replaced a lot of different technologies. Telecom sector is kind of basically responsible for delivering a lot of value across the globe, right? But one of the challenges with all that good, I think one of the challenges that we are seeing is that the privacy with respect to the data that we are generating using the telco services, right? And I want to give one very interesting example. So there was one village in India which conspired together to kind of basically defraud people using basically the mobile services. So they used to basically get they used to use fake accounts to get SIM cards, and then they used to basically call people across the world and then basically ask for payments in one way or the other. So it was a very, very huge scam that was basically done by just one village, right? So in that sense, you can think about it, how transformational this technology is, that it can be basically used by any type of people, because it doesn't matter how well educated you are or not. But then it's such a big power that is being basically put into a lot of misused hands as well, right? Now the problem here is that when we are basically getting a mobile connection, we are basically providing our information, right? And then using that information, we have been provided this this particular service. But problem is how that particular data is being exchanged. As the problem statement is twofold. One is that how is my identity information used to kind of get an access to this telecom services. And then second, the data that I'm generating using the telco services and the mobile devices and everything, the access to that data, right? So this is where I think this is where the SSI or the decentralized identity becomes very, very important, because I think the underlying concept with respect to the data ownership, the privacy, and the consent is kind of missing as of today with respect to the how those services are being acquired and how those services are being used.
Got it. Anybody else?
Yes, Gerard, if I may. So great points made there, Shiv. Thank you so much. My own views are that data is not a neutral field when you talk about data, and governance therefore is imperative. And I think platforms need to incorporate public values. And what are these? So public values consist of privacy, probity, security on the one side, truth and fairness on another, and accountability and democratic control on another. So platforms need to incorporate these public values and deliver public good, and not the other way around, right? So governance requires to bring back control to where it belongs. And where is that? So that is where, to those who supply the attention, the monies, I would say the content and the trust. And who are these suppliers? These are individuals like you and me. These are markets. This is government, and this is the civil society. So net, I guess striking the right balance between effective data privacy, security, and innovation really is the key to help expand the economic opportunity for the world. So when, Gerard, you ask me why is digital identity so important, and as so well articulated by Shiv, it is not only across the telecom sector, but across every single walk of life. I would say digital identity forms the core stack around which all such innovation is built.
Excellent.
Let me go next then. I think I'll pick on the same aspect of the people aspect, right? The point here is, now I give a different dimension to it, not the telecom in general. Think about the public. If you want to address or take control on 100 million people at a time, what is the best way to do it? It's the ISP, right? Internet service provider. Who is the telecom provider? Right. So these are the aggregators, or we can say the people who have so much of personal data and call data records and the communication, what you're doing, the internet transactions, what we do, everything actually speaking, right? And they are actually the utmost close to government. In case something happens on the law and order, they are the first people to approach and understand, okay, where this transaction moved or who has done what, right? That's the way it used to be. Now think about the evolution of 5G and IoT, right? So we are adding more and more data points to what we can say, the millions of users already there. So coming back to the same question of Piyush, how do you manage right? Data privacy, data security, reliability, and then ensuring that they are available when needed by the government without tampering it, obviously. So these are very so many components to handle, right? I worked a lot of time in telecoms. Thinking in the telecom as a organization per se, it's a complicated story for the business itself to secure and handle. And second aspect is for the individuals, right? They can use it for any way or means right now. And think about not just the individuals, but also the bots which are coming in, right? So automatically you can use or create multiple SIM cards and virtual calling. So these are adding up additional dimensions to the telecom industry of, is the call coming from a real person or is it coming from a bot, right? So I mean, if you actually draw a structure or of how this is happening, it's a mess of mesh network, right? So the complications of managing identity is highly complex, and I'm going all the way to the aspect of the future. What happens 5G comes? Now there are rural areas they might not be using. Now with the 5G and computing becomes stronger, then what happens then, right? How do we handle it? I think there are so many challenges which could be which would be very difficult to handle when we have all this data aggregated at one place.
Excellent. Excellent. Anybody else?
Yeah.
All right.
Gerard, Rajesh to do here. Great points by everyone. Also, some of the things that that we need to look at is in terms of, for example, when you share the information, you have a right to know where all that information is being utilized, right? In olden days, you had given good old physical copies as identification. And in some countries, there was a practice wherein people write saying that this particular identity, I'm giving it only for verification purpose by the bank. And they used to write that in a physical copy of identity in such a way that the ability of that particular document to be misutilized is very, very limited, because the disclaimer is so well integrated into that piece of document that it cannot be misutilized. Now you come into the realm of digital identity. You don't even know where your identity is being shared and how it is being shared. It has got a domino effect. The fact that it is digital in nature, it becomes easily portable across the channels and across different avenues. So you don't even know where those particular documents are going. And so is the case with the current scenario. For example, there's been an interesting case wherein a person had switched on their location details primarily to tell another person in the family to find a way to the hospital because they had an emergency. And when he switched on, the neighboring restaurant started pushing offers for dinner that particular night. It is completely out of context and completely irrelevant compared to his particular situation. And when he went back and then asked the regulator, this is the situation that I had been in. Can you please share whenever I switch on my location details with whom all it is being shared? And why is it being shared without my consent at all? And these kind of scenarios which are going to evolve in a digital world. And that's where those are the challenges that the telcos need to solve. For example, the network to which this particular belonged, and that particular telco was not even able to give information as to this particular. In a way, it is a personally identifiable information, right? My telco has no business where I go, and it has no right to share my location without my express consent. But they've been doing it. So these are some of the challenges that are coming up, and these are the challenges that need to be addressed. And I think self-sovereign identity has a big potential to address some of those challenges.
Excellent. Let me use that to pivot to the next topic, which is really the understanding the difference between persona and identity. And so just so we're all on the same page, when I talk about what identity is, everything about you, right? All of the data about you that identifies who you are, whereas persona is the elements of information that you need to communicate to somebody to engage in an interaction. So, for example, when I call an Uber driver, right, I don't really need to know what their birth date is or you know, how many kids they have or how much money they make. But what I do need probably to know is what do they look like? What kind of car are they in? Maybe what's their license plate number? Maybe what are their ratings, right? So those data elements that are important to me for this engagement is the persona, right? And of course, everything about them is their identity, right? Which makes up their identity profile. So how does the concept of persona and identity, how does it relate to telecommunications? And Shiv, I'm going to ask you to go last, because then what I want to ask you is, how does Earth ID, because you're the only person on here that represents an actual digital identity company, how does Earth ID deal with the difference between identity and persona? And then potentially, if anybody wants to get a digital identity, how would they do that? So the first question of the whole panel is, how does the difference between persona and identity relate to telecommunications? And then Shiv, if you don't mind bringing us home with how does a company like Earth ID deal with those two topics?
Yep. So Gerard, Piyush here. I would guess that this is largely to do with the big discussion about personal data and non-personal data. So when you talk about identity, I think it relates to personal data, and when you talk about persona, it relates to non-personal data. So in the SSI architecture model, as I understand, the personal data is stored in the user's private digital wallet, right? So this is information which is stored by me. It is certified by issuers, and I'm in a position to, be used by, let's say, well-known organizations or individuals that I allow this to. And when you're able to combine it with blockchain, with the kind of technologies and the exponential ways in which new technologies are coming in, is where magic happens. So my sense of it is that the ability to be able to look at it as a personal data versus non-personal data, but so well articulated by you when you call it an identity versus persona, makes it very easy to understand from a layman's point of view. I think that's very well articulated.
Good. Thank you. I don't get compliments often, so when I get them, I've got to milk them for all they're worth. In fact, I have to share a story with you. Many years ago, I was having a conversation with my teenage daughter, and I was trying to give her some advice, and she wasn't listening. And so I got frustrated. I said, I said, don't you know that there's some companies that actually pay me for my advice? And she just looked at me and she said, they're stupid, Dad. So when I get a compliment, I do try to milk it. Yes, to anybody else in the panel, how does persona and identity impact or relate to telecommunications?
So I might go next. So to me, persona means profiling. I'm not sure whether I understood correctly. Hopefully that's what you mean. Profiling is like, okay, in the telecom per se, you can actually identify from where to where you travel, the GPS location and the coordinates. And also the IP address again gives you the digital location of the person. And then also the some kind of behavior of when the person is logging in, when the person is logging out. All those aspects which actually can, with those aspects, you can build a persona. Let's say a person is actually always logging in from a particular location or an IP range, which is within India. So this person is actually basically a domestic person in India. And we found some entries outside the India because of something, that's a machine based, right? The machine which is connected, that's one way of persona. Another thing is this happens when you are doing a forensics of a person and something happened, right? So then you check, okay, what are the websites the person accessed? And then what's the behavior of person, right? It's all official or it's something, all this, actually the analytics of personal behavior of how much time is spent on official versus personal versus something else. And then, and depending upon that, the analytics, behaviors are being sought out, and also the logs which comes out of it to find the deviant behavior. This is not the way the person used to be. It may be an attack, right? So to do the forensic analysis, also the persona is used in telecom majorly. So that's how, that's where the part I was saying about the government comes in, right? When something happens, cybercrime happens, they go to telecom, asks actually, can you give this person's complete information of how the transactions happened on this account from this IP address. So then they go back with doing these analytics, building a persona and finding the discrepancies to either attach to the person or detach from the person to do this investigation, just to give you an idea.
Right.
So I can give you some examples from the Indian telco world based on the recent implementation of a blockchain solution at scale, covering about 1.2 billion subscribers, in terms of how they're basically building the persona of the telecom subscribers. We all know that spam is invading the handsets globally, and I thought it was a problem invented in India, but spam is a global problem. And a lot of telcos have been struggling to protect their end customers from intrusive commercial text as well as intrusive commercial calls. And they came up with a initiative called Do Not Disturb. My personal experience has been when I went and updated my number in Do Not Disturb register, the next day I got 3x more calls. So the Do Not Disturb is not going to work at all. So ultimately, the Telecom Regulatory Authority of India had said that all the telco subscribers have to be protected from the spam calls and spam texts through a blockchain-based solution, wherein at the minimum, two important details of the subscribers need to be gathered. One is a consent and another one is a preference. Consent will basically say, yes, I'm okay to receive commercial text pertaining to, let's say, a new line of SUV. That is consent. And preference will basically say, I would like to receive the text over a weekend on a Saturday, probably at about 4 to 5 p.m. and not in a window outside this. Now, I go on giving my consent and preferences for different class of services. And when the telcos start aggregating my consent and preference, for example, I give consent for a new line of SUV. I give my consent for a cruise liner vacation. I give my consent to adventure holidays. I give my consent to buy sports insurance related to this to adventurous sports. Then the telco starts building the persona of that particular subscriber, and that's how the persona information is being collected. But in the current times, the telcos are not authorized to share that consent and the preference information as an information which will be made available to the marketeers. But there is definitely a path towards monetization of that information over a period of time. That is how the persona information is being collated through a blockchain kind of an initiative. And of course, identity, the telcos primarily use identity to validate from a KYC perspective, right? Know your customer, because a lot of telcos are also supposed to validate the identity when there is an investigation, either by a cybersecurity organization that belongs to a government, or when there is an forensic audit that is done to establish or to validate whether this person is actually the person that the person claims to be. And that's how that gets into a completely different dimension, at least from my experience with Indian telcos. That's how they're going to differentiate between an identity from a persona.
Excellent. Any other comments before I turn it over to Shiv? All right, so Shiv, how does Earth ID deal with the issue or the difference between persona and identity? And if somebody wanted to get a decentralized identity, how would they do that in an Earth ID context?
Thanks, Chirag. I think some very, very good points with respect to the differences between the identity and the persona, right? I think my understanding is basically persona is actually identity for a specific purpose. So it's about consent and the intended purpose of the information that being shared. So as Rajesh gave quite a few examples in terms of what could be the different usages or purposes, right? And I think the purpose of SSI is exactly that, right? It's about when I say SSI, it's self-sovereign identity. It's about how are you able to basically, because when you talk about identity, there are so many different aspects about you which consists your digital identity, right? And then there are so many permutations and combinations about that data which can then translate into so many different personas, right? So I think what SSI and solutions like Earth ID, what they allow is that you can basically add your identity information, like you already have a passport, you have a driving license, you have SSN, you have Aadhaar. So you are able to basically add all those documents to your wallet, which sits on your phone or somewhere else in the cloud. But then you also allow issuers to directly issue identities to your wallet. And it could be a university degree, it could be my financials or whatever, right? So now what I have is like I have a common wallet where all my identity information is resident. And what it also allows is like it gives me that power to kind of selectively decide what I want to share with whom, right? And this is where I am able to build, you can say basically thousands of persona about myself, because there are different combinations of information that I can create, and they would be specifically they would be fit for a specific purpose, right? So it might be that I'm just trying to prove my age, or I'm just trying to prove my nationality, or I'm just trying to basically share 4 fields with the website where I'm trying to register, right? Or I'm just trying to basically share my SSN or my Aadhaar with a telco provider so that they can issue me a connection, right? So in that sense, SSI, what SSI allows is like it provides that micro level control with respect to what you can share and with whom you can share. And that information is basically also, and blockchain plays an important role in this, because it kind of basically connects the issuer and the verifier. In this context, a telco company with, let's say, a passport authority to ensure that the information that has been shared, it's valid and authentic. But the user is in complete control with respect to what is being shared with whom. And in this sense, basically what a user can do from a user journey perspective is they can download Earth ID from one of the stores, and then they can register themselves, and they can start receiving identity information from different issuers. And then from there, they can start sharing this information with different service providers on need basis, with a very strong control in terms of how that is being shared and what is being shared. And then they can also revoke access in certain scenarios as well. So this is where it's like turning the tables in terms of giving more control to the owner of the information. And it's not just about humans. It could be about organizations. It could be about smart devices in terms of what information they have and how they want to basically share it with their stakeholders.
So the Government Blockchain Association has recently selected Earth ID as our identity management wallet of choice, right? Because we had an option to look at a lot of different ones, but we like Shiv and the work that you're doing and stuff like that. If somebody wanted, so to engage with GBA in the future and to receive GBA reward tokens for the work we're doing, you'd have to have an Earth ID. What if somebody wanted to get an Earth ID? Does it cost them anything? Is it expensive? What's the process?
So I think this is where the true power is, right? Because we are it's about letting the user monetize their data, right? Because as of today, the data is being monetized by bigger organization, and this is where when you create an Earth ID, the end user is not paying for anything. They are creating their identity, but obviously the service providers who are going to get the access after users consent, they are the people who will be paying. So in that sense, you're kind of turning the tables and then letting the users to kind of use a service without having to pay when they're actually kind of sharing access to their information.
Got it. Okay. So, and just a note, there's some questions in there about the selection and use of a Hedera hash graph. Why don't you answer that in the chat? If a bunch of other people want to know, or that picks up momentum, then we'll turn around and we can have a conversation about it. Also, for all the folks that are listening, if you'd like to put your name and contact information in the chat, we will make this available on the GBA events page once we're all done. The presentation, the audio, and the chat will all be available. So if anybody wants to scrape that information, we'll also have to end a few minutes before the hour, because we have another event immediately following this on blockchain elections, and I'll provide information on that at the end. So here's the next topic, and this is kind of interesting. So as many of you know, we had an election here in the United States just recently. I guess we're still having that election to a degree. There are a number of people who are disputing the validity of the election, and there's a great deal of controversy about it. So yesterday, I made a post where I was talking about our blockchain and elections event. And I used a term in there just to acknowledge the fact that there was some controversy. I think I used the term election fraud or something like that, just to sort of describe it. I normally get 1,000 to 2,000 views in the first day. That post got virtually no views, right? And just recently, within the last couple of days, one of the major social media platforms put out a policy that said that they were going to restrict any messages about voter fraud, right? And so as I've been thinking about this, and I think about what China is doing with their social reputation scores, and we think about the incredible amount of power that some of these telecom and ISPs and internet companies have to either promote or suppress information. How does the issue of digital identity, self-sovereign identity, how does that relate to the concentration of power, the issue of potential censorship, right? How do those topics relate? Any thoughts or comments about that?
So, two views again. I think data historically has been used as a basis for research. We all, of course, realize that it is an input for knowledge, and it is, of course, a grounding for understanding. But data historically, as we've understood it, Gerard, we've always treated it as a stable object. It could be a reusable good, it could be an asset, it could be what you are referring to is, it could be a tool of power and domination, right? And which is why increasingly it seems to be becoming a subject of legislation and governance. So the once humble data today denotes all of the things that I just talked about and much more. And when it is activated across contexts and aggregated with others, which is ever kind of growing in quantity, range, value, and implications across social, economic, political, I think you totally get into a fabric which is absolutely unprecedented. So in the context of the telecom sector, I believe that the telecom companies going forward would need a war chest for a very capital intensive sector. And just as internet and mobile telephony at a point in time revolutionized almost the last 2 decades, a new world marked by IoT, by autonomous cars, by AI, by blockchain is what is coming upon us, right? So leveraging 5G with edge computing requires all kinds of deep technology, and collaboration is going to be the key word. So I think the whole issue of the industry defining landscape is what is undergoing a complete change, and the old guard industries, of which I may name telecom as one, are metamorphosing themselves into what they're calling as ecosystem businesses, and they have to compete in a dynamically evolving new age war zone, so to say. So for a brief history of the future, I think all of us guys, we need to be bracing up. The curtains are just about going to go up as far as platformization of telecom is concerned, and the big cats are obviously on the prowl, and the show is about to begin. And digital identity, I can assure you, is going to be at the heart of it. Those are my 2 cents.
All right.
If I may, Gerard, just have some input. So I think digital identity is an opportunity. As I said before, it's about automating processes, and I think the emphasis should be on customer experience or user experience, and the benefits you can have from not needing to show your passport or your proof of address or whatever to multiple people. But as Shiv was saying, you have a verified, you have a issuer, you have verifiers, and you can use the same credential for multiple people, and just that in itself, can bring about massive customer experience improvements and massive process automation improvements, right? I think that's the first stage. I think going forwards, where you sort of mention digital identity application to elections and different things, of course there's going to be many applications, but coming to the fundamentals of your questions, self-sovereign digital identity pushes the control of that data, building on GDPR and other things, to the person who holds the data, theoretically. So where you get the pure form of that, then they have the control to essentially allow people to see their data or not. And I think that is that is a sort of win in terms of driving the power of the data back to the person or the user. And I think that will change business models massively, but that's positive. And I think there's going to be a lot of business made on the experience, voter experience benefits that will begin to change our everyday lives, hopefully for the better. So I'm trying to put a positive spin on it. It's not about censorship. It's an opportunity for people. It's an opportunity for businesses to interact in a more automated way.
Anybody else?
Yeah, and I think that's a very great point. And I think the key purpose of SSI is about the ownership, right? And I think all of us agree to that point. And I think it's about the resilience of the identity as well. Because if you think about the passport, the driving licenses and everything, they are controlled and owned by certain organizations, right? So for example, a passport is issued by my country. My Facebook account is basically is controlled by Facebook. And similarly, I think there are so many examples, right? And then these organizations are kind of owners of these identities because they can revoke them, right? Whenever they want, they can revoke them based on so many certain parameters or aspects, right? Now, the concept of self-sovereignty is that this is an identity which is kind of owned by the user. It cannot be taken away by somebody else. But obviously, it's kind of a sum total of all the identities that have been issued to me by so many different organizations or service providers. But what it allows me to do is like it allows me to basically at least have something which I am able to basically use to access services in a privacy and a consent-oriented fashion. And this is where basically the kind of the control and power comes back to the user, because even if my passport is taken away, I still have basically a lot of other identities which I have kind of basically used to create a lot of personas, as we discussed earlier, and then I am still able to basically interact with a lot of services which I need, and this can be done in a borderless way. So in that sense, it kind of basically takes, at least to certain level, I think obviously it cannot be done as of now, it hasn't been done 100%, but it kind of helps users to tackle to censorship to certain extent. Obviously, it also coming back to Scott's point, right? With technology is not necessarily, I think, the challenge. The adoption and with respect to, I think, the governance are those things which are the difficult things to achieve, right? And this is where I think the technology supports this non-censorship or the tackling censorship in that sense. But obviously, I think we'll have to bring a lot more organizations, a lot more people onto the platform to kind of basically truly create a pure SSI, which is basically owned by the user at the end of the day.
You know, we have a lot of expertise on the panel from a cybersecurity perspective, right? And these telecom networks are used to conduct a lot of crime, right? And there's a lot of bad actors. If we have a self-sovereign ID and we only know somebody's persona, we don't know their identity, what kind of challenge does that present from a cybersecurity perspective? What kind of challenge does it present from a law enforcement perspective, right? Is there some issue or concern that decentralizing identity could actually make it harder for law enforcement and cybersecurity professionals to protect folks? And or what are some of the cybersecurity maybe paradigm shifts that we may need to consider if we move into more of a blockchain-based world?
Yep. I'll give a try on this. Let's see how it works, right? So the way I see, I mean, the most people, right? So when somebody says blockchain, people remember Bitcoin. That's not true, though. The end of the day, the idea here is when there is something comes in where people can conceal their identity or secure with themselves, they use it for different purposes, not always the best way it is, right? While there are a lot of benefits, what we just discussed, there are challenges like the way you just mentioned. If somebody is not ready to reveal their identity, how do you enforce that he or she is the person who has done the fraud, right? Now today, so as I said, if something happened, then you go to Telecom and ask, okay, give me the record so that I'll validate. And they are forced to do it as a part of the telecom authority or a local government, right? Same way, Google or Facebook, they are actually forced or liable to give that information because it's needed for the law and order, right? So what happens in case an individual have done something in the negative order and they're not ready to reveal the true identity, right? Those are the concerns people have. I know there might be answers around it, but just I'm putting on the hat of the devil and just giving that side of the story.
You're a very nice devil. Yeah. and if you come with solutions, you're more like an angel. So, anybody else? What is this? Some of the cybersecurity impacts of decentralized ID and telecom?
I think it is only going to enhance the cybersecurity posture with the adoption of identities. You know, even today we have identities, but they are more decentralized. They're more centralized in nature. They're not decentralized. The fact that they are centralized, that database can be compromised and the identities can be changed. But in a decentralized kind of an identity, it becomes extremely difficult to change the identity without the knowledge of the other people who are in the ecosystem and who have access to those identities, number one. And number two, one of the other biggest potential from a self-secured identity is it's going to antiquate the passwords. Today, most of the cyber frauds are being perpetrated either through a phishing attack or through a social engineering by which the password information is being harvested intelligently. And once that information is harvested intelligently, people are faking the identity of the person to whom it belongs to, or those password data belongs to, right? So from that perspective, given these two things, I would only tend to think that self-sovereign identity is going to enhance cybersecurity and not compromise it.
Excellent. Listen, I want to give an opportunity for folks in the chat to ask questions. So if there's any questions you have, or actually any sort of comments or announcements, please feel free to put it in the chat. I'll be scanning. I'll be scanning the chats to sort of go through that. And Mike made an important note. He said custodial rights for underage, elderly. Is that a difficult issue? What are your thoughts on that?
Okay. So let me take that one. So obviously, I think one of the key challenges which kind of industry is looking at is to try to solve as well is basically the problems with respect to unaccounted people, unbanked people, right? So we have over 3 billion people around the world who don't have any. I see 1 billion people who don't have any form of identity and 3 billion people who don't have any digital identity, right? And we are talking about people like refugees, children, who don't have, who are not in the system, right? And the problem with that is like it leads to so many different problems with respect to human trafficking, not having access to basic amenities, not having bank accounts, and so many different issues that translate from one single problem of not having an identity, right? And this is where because SSI is something which can be issued and owned by a user, and it can be also kind of delegated with respect to the control. For example, let's say if a child is there, then the control of their identity can be delegated to their parents, to their guardians, and this could basically eventually help control certain issues like child labor and child trafficking, right? So in that sense, this is where SSI is not necessarily dependent on individuals having some sort of a national ID, right? It could be easily tied to your biometrics, and this is where when we talk about SSI, biometrics becomes a very, very important aspect. Because even if you don't have a document or some form of identity issued to you by a certain organization, you still have your biometrics, right? You have your fingerprints, you have your face, you have your palms. So there's so many different ways of biometric technology that are available today, which kind of captures or digitizes your identity, and that can be used to basically you issue an SSI or a digital identity, which then can be used to basically bring people into the system, and then also basically to help them get the right service or the right benefits from governments and so many other service providers.
Anybody else? All right. So
I agree on that, Shiv's point. So a lot of organizations actually, what you can say, commercialized or monetized the children's data, and and which is not supposed to be. That's more sensitive than adults' personal data, so which is more sensitive for parents as well. We don't want to share our kids' activities, etc., which are not supposed to be monitored by anyone, right? I think usage of the decentralized identity and delegation is a really a great way to provide some kind of assurance and also confidence that we can control. We can keep it with ourselves, right? So that gives the users a little kind of assurance that we know what is happening. In certain stages, we don't know what's happening, right? In the today's scenario, so once you access with some ID, so they know everything. So, for example, I'll give you a scenario. I just went into Google Maps, and then there is something called places, and you just check. And from 2012 to today, what are the places I traveled, where I slept, when I took a flight, and when I moved, what I moved, all those information very clearly mentioned, where I took a flight from where to where, and what hotel I stayed for how many days, all those information. Same applies to my son as well, who is just 13. So just these are the things. If we can decentralize and have control with ourselves, that would be really great.
Excellent. So my next couple of questions is really about how can people get involved with blockchain, digital identity, telecom, some of the things that you're doing. So let's start with Shiv and the panel. If folks are interested in, kind of going deeper down the rabbit hole, what are you doing? How can they get involved? And then we've got a bunch of GBA leaders on the call. We've got Mode. I saw Sam from the Middle East. I think Juan's on there from London. So once the panel sort of talks about ways that people kind of can engage with you or engage so that they can further their maturity in the blockchain, identity, telecom space, please feel free to share that, and then we'll have some of the other GBA leaders share what's going on in the different parts of the world so people can connect, and then maybe I'll just share some things about GBA globally. So Shiv, how can people get involved?
So my email address is already kind of emailed every attendee and every panelist. So I think at least they have my information with respect to how they can reach out to me, or even my social media information is there. I think the other point is that we are doing these events in partnership with GBA, and I think this is a great channel or forum to basically kind of do these brainstormings and discussions. And I think this is where we want to basically do more of these sessions, and we want more people to participate. And because even if you look at the chat, it's buzzing, right? And there's so many great questions which we are not able to discuss, but we want to get back to all those people. But I think this is a great forum, and I think we'll keep doing it.
For you who don't know, so GBA Global is a nonprofit 501c6. We have chapters around the world. So this is an example of where we currently have chapters. So we have about 15,000 people in about 120 cities around the world. The purpose of those chapters is really to develop local connections with government and private industry. Anybody in the government can join GBA for free. And then we have working groups. So Shiv actually leads, let's see, there's just some way I can move this down here. Perfect. So Shiv actually leads our identity management working group and a number of others, but we have working groups on artificial intelligence, acquisition management, asset management, big data, budget appropriations, campaign, cannabis, contract, cybersecurity. The list goes on and on. We have over 50 working groups, and the purpose of the working groups are for people to come to the working groups, and folks in government come because they have problems to solve, and they say, hey, we're looking for a solution, we're looking to solve this problem. And then the members of those working groups, they say, here's our solution, here's our white paper, here's our demo. And then in doing that, they do all the solutioneering, and then the government folks go back to their contracting officer and they say, I need you to issue an RFP. Here's the statement of work. Here's my acquisition strategy. Send it to these people. Make sure you keep it below this amount so that we don't have to compete it. So as you can see, we've got a working group on telecom, internet, and communications. That we've got a working group on voting. We've got, so and identity management is one of those topics that really impacts everything. And so what happens with the working groups is they do a couple things. One of them is they host events. So the Identity Management Working Group actually partners with other working groups. So today we did the Decentralized Identity for Telecom sector. And then immediately following this one, we have blockchain and elections, right? So if you go to gbaglobal.org/events, you'll get to this. We would encourage you. We've got training courses. We've got training courses on blockchain foundations. We're doing another event on logistics and supply chain. And then we haven't put our 2021 events on the calendar yet, except for Government Blockchain Week, which will happen in May. And I think we showed you some of the speakers. But this event will be in Washington, D.C. It's a full week. We're going to have events at the British Embassy, at the Washington, D.C. government, this blockchain innovation, economic growth. We're looking at a place at the Department of Treasury. We've got the legal, law enforcement, and cybersecurity group is going to be at the Attorney General's office, money, bank, and cryptocurrency. This FinTech Leadership Roundtable will be at the Embassy of Bahrain. Crypto Night will be on the rooftop of the International Spy Museum. And then our final two events will be at the United States Capitol. And that event is in the Congressional Auditorium. It's a 450-seat venue where the president addresses the joint sessions of Congress. So it's a gorgeous space, and we'll have speakers there, including Don Tao, Scott Stornetta, and then literally global leaders from around the world, right? From Alabama to Kazakhstan, the Australian Trade Commission, Australia Institute of Technology, Blockchain Intelligence Group. We got a judge from Romania, California, some major government contractors. We've got state government, Croatia. Senya is actually on our tax working group and putting out just an incredible report. We've got folks from Dash and Crypto.com. Digital Scarcity builds, they build DAO components. European Commission, I mean, it just goes on and on. The UN, IMF, World Bank, the United Kingdom Department for International Trade, and then a bunch of U.S. House of Representatives, Library of Congress. So this event is going to be quite an event. It will definitely be a global event where we're bringing people together from all over the world. In addition to that, GBA also has a full-blown certification program, right? So, and I really want to build out a telecom course. So we currently have a blockchain foundations and then specialist course for technical, healthcare, legal, financial, and then an executive consultant course. But I'd love to build out a telecom course for us. And then under association, we've got a membership directory. So if you're looking for blockchain resources, right, this is a place where you can search by name, location, domain, use case. This is a directory where a lot of event planners look for speakers. So we have that. Everybody's got a profile. It's a big sort of social media. In fact, just to give you an example, if I type in my name, G-E-R-A-R-D, just to show you a little bit about how this works. So everybody's got they've got a social media platform so they can communicate with each other. You can find the profile to find out a little bit about them, their contact information. You can see what groups they're a part of. So we actually create all kinds of synergistic working groups where people can connect, communicate, and collaborate. So this is, and the reason why we do this is if people are in different groups that are based on location, community, domain, if I'm in a Washington, D.C. chapter meeting and I hear somebody say, my boss is looking for a voting solution, I can also say, oh, well, I'm in the voting working group. We're working with a company out of Boston called Votes. Here's their contact information. And in doing that, we create a giant decentralized database of blockchain expertise that is decentralized so that it just kind of moves seamlessly. And then we also have the same kind of thing for organizations. So oftentimes organizations will want to partner with each other. And so these are the different types of organizations that are part of GBA. Oftentimes, people are trying to partner because they're working on proposals or contracts, things like that. And then under resources, we have about 8 gigs worth of information. Just to give you an example, and I think I saw John Dean Marcunas on the call, but yeah. So this is a user uploaded content. There's a lot of junk on the internet, but this is stuff that's you know, our members are serious, and it's also vetted through our web team. We're working on all kinds of really interesting and innovative projects. This one's called the Cryptocurrency Maturity Profile, where we're literally building a dashboard and a report for government leaders to really understand the size, trajectory, and velocity of the new cryptocurrency ecosystem. We're also building out things like the Government Business Blockchain Platform, which is a multi-blockchain platform that allows governments to build solutions on. So regardless of the technology, they can build citizen services, blockchain solutions, emergency management, healthcare, all kinds of stuff. And so this is a decentralized, it's a permissioned but a decentralized blockchain that we're building globally to build government services on. So GBA's we got about 1 million different activities, and the thing about all of them is they're all interconnected, right? So again, going back to the working groups, identity management is one of those things that literally connects to every working group. And that's why we're so thrilled to be working with Shiv and Earth ID, because we need to build identity management solutions in all of these different platforms that we're building. And it's just really cool. So let me restore, I'm going to stop my sharing. All right. Any questions on GBA or any of the stuff that we're doing, or how we can help you guys connect with any of your goals, dreams, wishes, and aspirations? Feel free to throw it in the chat. Otherwise, I'm going to turn it back over to the panelists for any final thoughts or comments that they might have.
Gerard, could you please unmute David, because now you're the host. If you can, David, yeah.
I'm sorry, David.
David Palmer, yeah.
Gotcha. All right. Yeah. So yeah. So if anybody needs me to unmute, please let me know. But I want to give all of our panelists an opportunity to reflect on what we've covered today and provide any sort of final thoughts or things that they'd like to talk about.
Yeah, so I'll just go and thank you very much, Gerard, for the outline of the Government Blockchain Association. I think it's a wonderful initiative to help you know, blockchain and people connect. But I'd just like to say, you know, really great panel and really great topic. I think that decentralized or self-sovereign decentralized digital identity is a key topic. I think it's going to be a game changer. Really impressed Shiv with the initiative, you know, with Earth ID. But I'd like to just say that, look, you know, it's starting now. And as you're correctly saying, there are initiatives now where yes, self-sovereign digital identities being trialed. Indeed, in Vodafone, we have a SSI solution that we're starting to sort of roll out, which is which will be interfacing with other SSI solutions. And I think for this to work, it will require some interoperability of SSI solutions. So we know that there's solutions like Sovereign. We know that you know, we've got you know, decentralized digital identity on Ethereum, etc. And I think for this to happen, you know, it will mean that entities will need to come together. I think that WC3 DID standards are a way of us maybe starting to work in parallel in a way that we can join up later. But you know, it has to start now. And yeah, it'd be really interesting to come back in a year and see where we are with it. But I think the message is that there are initiatives starting now. You know, let's follow the standards. The WC3 DID standards are really good. And yeah, and it's not just about big organizations like Vodafone and other telcos, but it's about building trust in other smaller initiatives as well. So really excited, learned a lot on the panel. So thank you for my fellow panelists today, for educating us. And yeah, would love to have further discussions and to know more about what's going on. So thank you.
David, we'd love to have you in our telecommunications working group. So why don't you maybe touch base with Shiv or myself?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a great initiative. Really supportive of it. Thank you.
Good deal. We're just a couple minutes over. I apologize for going over, but I really appreciate all the comments. And Shiv, thank you for putting this thing on. I'm impressed as always by the folks that you pull together.